empCannabis New York podcast. Coming to you live every Wednesday. New York's #1 podcast for cannabis news, business, medicine, and culture.
Live in empCannabis New York podcast. We have a great podcast for you. We're talking about our ongoing cannabis health series, and we're going to be getting into cannabis and dementia with Dr. Ken Weinberg and Dr. Lynn Parodneck and Sang Choi, who is the head pharmacist Downstate for Etain. And before we have that panel, we are going to give a brief report on what happened last week with the Governor Hochul and her new protocols to address the issue of the unlicensed dispensaries. So we're going to play that report for you right now.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul is cracking down on illicit cannabis operations across the state. She unveiled new initiatives aimed at shutting down unlicensed dispensaries and protecting the legal marijuana marketplace.
We've waited far too long for this reckoning with all the illegal shops, and your day has come. Frustrated local leaders have been powerless as these unlicensed shops operate right under their noses, sowing chaos, destabilizing neighborhoods, and attracting other types of crime. License owners like Osbert and so many others like him, they stake their entire futures on New York's legal cannabis industry. They did everything right. I'm using the power of the state budget to give us the tools we need at the state and local level to shutter these illegal shops once and for all.
This is a powerful tool that we can utilize, and I'm sure these measures combined with our already robust enforcement efforts will help keep the playing field level and push back against the quality of life issues that have resulted from the proliferation of illegal storefronts.
The new measures include giving broad padlocking authority to the state's Office of Cannabis Management. They can immediately padlock businesses selling illicit cannabis products if there are sales to minors, unlicensed processing, violent conduct, unlawful firearms, proximity to schools or churches, untested or unlabeled products, or products causing illness. Local authorities in counties and cities like New York City will also have new authority to padlock unlicensed shops. There are strict new penalties for landlords who fail to evict tenants running illicit operations, including $50,000 fines in New York City. The state is also creating a new enforcement task force to go after suppliers providing cannabis to the illegal stores.
So under the legislation as it's drafted now, we can delegate to the NYPD the ability to actually execute the padlock itself, which is going to be helpful because they have much more people than the rest of these agencies, and so that's how we'll largely have them play. And so the question has been, how does the NYPD utilize our civil enforcement authority, which they cannot? And so them executing the padlock is a great way to have that force multiplier without disrupting our civil enforcement authority, regardless of what they do with their criminal enforcement authority that they utilize with the DA. From when we launch our effort, we'll be able to go in, we conduct these inspections, we go in, we identify legal cannabis products, we seize those products, and so then we catalog them based on product type. We leave, we get everybody out the building, and we put a padlock on the door.
Despite these new measures, the OCM face an uphill battle with rogue dispensaries such as one that brazenly dares OCM on their website to try to shut them down, and even brags about their proximity to schools and kid-friendly product. This is Tyrell Glenn for empCannabis News.
All right, so that's what's going on in our neck of the woods, and we're going to now get into our cannabis health series, and we're pleased to have back again Dr. Ken Weinberg and Dr. Lynn Parodneck, and we're going to talk a little bit about cannabis and dementia. And first of all, let's just talk about dementia, because that's a big catch-all category. And can you tell us a little bit about your work with cannabis and how it's been effective?
To your point, cannabis, dementia can develop from a multitude of different causes. I think 65 or 70% at least of the causes are Alzheimer's, so most of it is Alzheimer's, but there are other issues as well. We, working with SANG, we've been just doing we've been seeing incredible stuff with our ability to really help a lot of the behavioral and some of the cognitive issues with dementia also.
And what made you decide to kind of go down this road and look at dementia out of all the different...
Great question. Several years ago, I found out about a place called Inspire that was opening on the Upper East Side, and I knew that they were going to be having patients with dementia as some of the major residents there, and I met with the people who own it and the medical director, and they were very pro-cannabis, and they were very encouraging about it. I had done a little bit with cannabis and dementia before, but really, since I've been working at Inspire, we've just had such incredible results with the products that I've just pushed out and got Lynn involved. We have another doctor out in LA that's involved with this. The Society of Cannabis Clinicians has been talking a lot about cannabis and dementia. And at some point, we should talk about the study that we're trying to do with Northwell. But that's kind of what got me into it. And again, because the results were so encouraging that it was really exciting. And again, working with SANG, we've had some amazing benefits and for not just the patients, but the caregivers, the families, the nursing staff at Inspire. So that's sort of where we're at.
And Lynn, can you tell us a little bit about some of your experiences with it?
So, absolutely. My husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. Yes, it turned out he had Parkinson's, but just being able to get him proper dosing, proper products. At the time, the New York program was open, but I was told there are two specific strains, Harlequin and ACDC, which are CBD dominant, and he had a much better day. So just watching him work with the products, I'm like, there's something to this. So I have a small private practice in Bedford, New York. Patients come in, often with family members. I've seen a lot of Parkinson's, a lot of Alzheimer's, frontotemporal dementia. So cannabis can be really amazing for this whole population, as well as the caregivers, because patients have it tough, but the caregivers are really the ones who suffer. Everybody suffers, but the burden of a caregiver with these diseases is really incredible. Something really interesting I've observed is New York is very strict. When patients are in assisted living, nursing homes, cannabis is locked up. They don't really want to have to do this. It's a big whoop. You get a lot of flack. My patients in Connecticut have it a lot easier. All they do is keep it in the nightstand. Nobody wants to know. Mm-hmm. So with things changing across the country, I think this will become a much more acceptable treatment. It will never be a cure, but if you can give somebody a decent day, why not? Mm-hmm.
So it helps a lot with the anxiety that people experience with dementia?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It keeps them much calmer, and these are usually senior citizens.
Yes.
The majority of senior citizens have pain in some form. So if you're hitting anxiety and pain, that's a win-win. And by working with appropriate medicine, the strains that work or the formulations that are catered for this issue, very nice results. You can get patients to sleep all night. You can get patients to have a nice little nap in the middle of the afternoon. It's really creates a much more humane situation in a household or an assisted living facility.
Now, Dr. Ken, we're still very early, and there hasn't, I think there may have been some research in Israel, but other than that, has there been a lot of research in terms of cannabis and dementia?
Yeah, well, it turns out that a few months ago, the Society of Cannabis Clinicians did a webinar on this. I didn't realize that as early as the 90s, Marinol, which is a synthetic THC product, was used and had very positive results in dementia. So that long ago, yes, a lot of this stuff is going on in Israel. I just wanted to add something to what Lynn was saying, which I think is an important component of this, that anxiety is really driving a lot of their behavioral issues. And there are two things that are going. One is the behavior, because they don't have impulse control, so they're acting out. And CBD is really, really good for calming down the anxiety. But also, for any of us, when we are anxious, we can have difficulty accessing information and accessing memories. And I have had families say to me, you know, my father now remembers things he didn't remember before because that anxiety has been taken away.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I wish my dad passed from Alzheimer's, and I wish we were this far along, 10 years ago. So I want us to go to Sang Choi, who is with us remotely in the Etain dispensary. Sang, how are you this afternoon?
Good. Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. So we're talking a little bit about dementia and anxiety in patients, and I know you're working with patients every day. Maybe you have some experiences you can share with us.
Yeah, sure. So Dr. Weinberg and I have been working with our senior population in the nursing home. And as they both said, we are seeing a lot of agitation, a lot of anxiety, sleep disturbances, and just acting very aggressively sometimes. And also we need to help them stimulate their appetite as well. So I think just having, like Dr. Parodneck said, just having someone get a really good night's sleep just kind of makes the next day much better. And that we know that especially CBD is neuroprotective. It's an anti-inflammatory and it's an antioxidant, which eats up all the free radicals that causes damage to our brains and our body. Hopefully the CBD or cannabis is helping to, stop or, slow down the progression of the disease. So we're just trying to just have someone just have a better quality of life, really. So we speak to a patient and the caregiver and just kind of figure out what might be going on with them. And Etain has different ratios. So we have ratios that are high CBD. We have, ratios that are 2-to-1 high CBD, 1-to-1, and a high THC. And, Dr. Weinberg and I just discuss the patient and we figure out sort of what's going on. And we start them on usually CBD because a lot of these patients are also fall risk. So we're just very cognizant of all those things, just making sure we're looking at the patient as a whole and how and what we can use for these patients to alleviate a lot of their symptoms. So that's what we're doing right now, just trying to make sure that these people that are suffering from dementia, Alzheimer's, that we can give them at least a very comfortable sort of day, because a lot of times there's also something called sundowning, where usually late afternoon, evening, bedtime, the agitation kind of gets worse. So we have a couple of patients where we give them we direct the nurses to give them medication like an hour or two before this starts to happen. So that just makes everything a little bit more comfortable for everyone.
Yeah, I remember sundowning. That's a special experience.
Nobody ever wants to
that
have.
nobody ever wants to have.
Needs
Yeah,
to have.
yeah. I had an experience with my dad. He was hospitalized at the time, but he was still having his dementia issues, and he wanted to leave, and let's just say he ended up hitting an orderly at the hospital, and after that we had to stay with him during the night. But you know, we laugh about those things years later, but it's, as you say, it's traumatic for caregivers when you're going through it. It's a really stressful thing, and the extent that cannabis can help manage that on both sides, both the caregiver and the patient. Can we talk a little bit about? I always like to bring up the endocannabinoid system in these things, even though most people haven't heard of it, because I feel people need to know about it and start to learn how it actually delivers health benefits in a unique way. And I think the idea that we have this system that has receptors all over the body, including the brain, what is the significance of that in terms of dementia and how it can positively affect the outcomes for dementia patients?
Right. Well, I think, you know, that's really the way these the behavioral improvements are happen, because we're actually hitting those receptors in different parts of the brain that are involved with agitation and you know, a number of the different cognitive processes. And you know, it's fascinating because this might be a good time to mention, we're working with a group in California that is trying to help us with a study we're doing through Northwell. They have discovered that there are particular biomarkers in the saliva that go up, that are created when the endocannabinoid system is activated. So you give somebody the right dose of cannabis, whether it's a lot of THC or 1-to-1 or high CBD, and within 90 minutes, the biomarkers will rise. And they'll show that there has actually been a change, a biochemical change. And what's fascinating, that this group has been working with autistic kids, and there's a lot of similarities between autistic children, it turns out, and patients with dementia. And they will see at 90 minutes, the parents will correlate directly behavioral changes that the kids have that correlate with these biomarkers, these salivary biomarkers. So it's very exciting, and I think that is our way in to really understand what those biochemical processes are that happen when you give somebody cannabis in the endocannabinoid system.
And cannabis is also good for reducing inflammation, correct?
No, as Sang said, it's incredible anti-inflammatory. I mean, I've been seeing, and I know Lynn has as well, patients who have autoimmune disease, where inflammation is a major component of it. And one other thing that I think needs to be mentioned is THC is very good for muscle spasticity, muscle tightness. A lot of these patients are really, they're contracted, they're tight. And the Israeli study that you may have been referring to from 2 years ago, the caregivers found that the patients, they were able to move the patients better, easier. Patients were less contracted. They were, so again, going back to what happens with the caregivers, they were just so happy about that. That was one of the really positive effects.
And do you think that tightness is also tied into that anxiety, just that sense of lack of control that just kind of makes the patient feel restricted and unsafe?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think you can't downplay the effects of anxiety, especially when you don't have the impulse control. The frontal lobes often are not working there to control those impulses. And so, yeah, I think there is a tightness. It's a good point. I think it's definitely part of what goes on.
Also, one nice thing that is work with cannabinoids, you can get rid of some of the pharmaceuticals. So we always keep everything as is, and then as we work with the patients, we're able to change dosing for specific things, and get rid of certain things.
Right.
So when you're getting rid of pharmaceuticals, there's often more pharmaceuticals given to counteract the side effects.
Right.
So you can really clean out the medicine cabinet and get down to what does somebody really need. And that can be very, very nice.
Right. Sang, can you tell us a little bit about some of your experiences in just that process of starting someone off and seeing where they are and then gradually moving them toward a better place?
Yeah, of course. So what Dr. Weinberg and I do is we will discuss the patient and just his observation of, how we should kind of handle this patient. And then we also get on the phone or like a Zoom or something with the actual caregiver, so the family. And we kind of figure out, because the family's really going to know exactly, what is happening, with their loved one. So what we do is we listen to sort of what is happening. And a lot of it is going to be, again, like that anxiety, the agitation. So let's say we would start with like a high CBD product during the day. We might do like somewhere between 5 to 10 milligrams in a tincture form or some sort of sublingual formulation. In like divided doses. So we might do 5 to 10, milligrams throughout the day. And then we assess. We give it about 2 weeks. And we we have meetings with their nursing staff, at these places and the caregivers as well, the family members. And we kind of assess what is happening to the patient. Has there been any change? Has anything gotten better? Has anything not gotten better? So we like to sort of know any little change is really helpful information to us, because then we know how to sort of tweak it. So we might add more CBD dosing throughout the day. We might give it at different times. We might give a longer acting formulation, like a capsule, so that it might be difficult to give someone a tincture. Maybe they just can't handle that. We might add a little THC at bedtime so that we can help them sleep a little bit better. Again, having a really, really good night's sleep is really amazing because it helps to restore everything in our bodies, right? Especially our central nervous system, our brain. So if someone's getting really good night's sleep, the next day is just going to look better, and maybe they're less symptomatic. So we're constantly following up and trying to figure out sort of the best ratio of THC and CBD. We're trying to figure out the dosing for this patient and the ease of use of certain dosage forms. So we're just trying to take a really broad look at how we can help the patients in the best way possible. And honestly, we have gotten really, really good feedback for most of our patients. So it's, the agitation has gone down. We have been able to increase appetite in certain patients. Their sleep is really so much better. And just, having like just a better outlook on life. So that's very rewarding for myself, just to be able to give something that is not pharmaceutical, but in addition to maybe a pharmaceutical medication that can really help these patients in the long run.
So the issue you talked about sleeping, that just kind of triggered a memory for me, because my dad was definitely a nighttime walker, and that was always a big problem. Is that a more or less thing that you see a lot with cannabis patients, that in the middle of the night they just go strolling? Or?
Yeah, and then I think that's a really good point, because that's when we might consider putting someone on a longer acting formulation. Mm-hmm. So we know that, sublingual formulations, things that go underneath the tongue, or just, oral mucosal absorption, they, probably take about 30, 45 minutes to work, but they work for about 4 to 6 hours. Maybe that's just not enough for someone. So now if you are doing more of like an oral, where you're ingesting something, that gives you a longer duration of action, so about 6 to 8. So once we have built up a tolerance in a patient to handle a little bit higher doses of THC and CBD, that's probably what we would switch to, just to give just a little bit longer time that they're in rest or in sleep.
So Lynn, listening to Sang, it reminds me of one of your issues that you like to see more different types of products. And just listening to Sang and talking about sublingual and all these, that, most of us, when we think of cannabis, people think of smoking. But there are so many other different ways now that you can consume this medicine that are much more appropriate and
Simpler.
Simpler. That's the word.
Yeah. So the recreational rollout, things have gotten a little not new in medical. I work with CBN a lot for sleep with patients, a combination of THC and CBN. And for my population, they've been having much better sleep. I would love to see nanotech incorporated and extended release in one formulation. Give somebody 8 hours, it would be amazing.
So it would be a time release. Oh, so you sleep the whole night. Oh my, that would be a that's the caregiver's dream.
It's
oh my
everybody's
God!
Dream. Yeah.
Wow.
So I would say people are looking at doing these things. Takes a lot of time and it costs a lot of money.
Right.
I mean, even just buying a pill press gets expensive. Never mind a capsule machine. So hopefully in the future, there'll be funds available to invest in medical. One of the biggest problems has been money shortage. I mean, these dispensaries are very expensive to run, operate, never mind roll out new products. So if this was federally legal, there could be funding, there could be grants given.
Right.
The way things are now, out of the gate.
Well, I think it's coming. And I think once we get that research started, we're going to find breakthroughs that people haven't even dreamed about. But Sang, I also want to talk to you about your relationship with the doctors and how you guys interact, because I think that that's really listening to you guys. It's such an important and critical function that you are able to interact with them, for the patient's behalf. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you work with doctors to help get the best benefit for their patients?
Sure. I mean, I think what I love about the collaboration here is, we are not leaving anything up to chance, and we are really discussing the patient from head to toe and just figuring out what the best plan of action for these patients are. So I love the fact that I can call Dr. Weinberg, I call him and say, hey, Dr. Weinberg, this is what's happening. This is what, the caregiver has told me. What do you think? How should we, do this? And we just have a conversation about, hey, okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? So it's really nice to have someone take care, or at least take care of the dosing and the collaboration for a patient. And I'm sure the caregiver probably really appreciates that as well. So I think we try our best to just make sure that the patient is on the right dose, the right ratio, and just trying to be really helpful, to the family and to the patient. So I just love that I can just call Dr. Weinberg, or he can call me, and we just talk about these patients and just figure out a plan, which has been amazing. And we've seen, obviously really, really good effects in certain patients of ours.
Can I just say something about that, Bob? I've said this before, I think, but what I really like is that the New York program is one of the few where I think there may be 3 in the country. I don't know if you know, Lynn, where they
Where the doctors
have to work with a
right,
pharmacist.
And patients cannot receive products until they've had the pharmacy conversation.
Right. So it gets the doctor back in the position of being the primary care physician. and it's just in a different different modality of.
Right, but when we're working with pharmacists who really understand all of the pharmacokinetics, et cetera, about the plant, and I find that a lot of my patients are really, it makes them feel better, more secure. Oh, I'm going to go talk to a pharmacist. You know, I'll tell you quickly, I was out in Colorado several years ago, and we were able to sneak into a medical facility, and I was with a bunch of doctors. We were at a conference, and so we figured, okay, this is like New York. You know, somebody who's a Colorado patient has gone to a doctor. The doctor has taken the time that, like Lynn and I would, and then sent them off to a dispensary. And so we're talking to the guy behind the counter, and he was like a 20-year-old stoner, and it was like, so how do you make decisions? Well, you know, I tried Blue Kush last night. It helped me sleep. And I'm thinking, oh, my God. So the fact, I really, you know, I mean, we've talked about it, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about the Michigas with the New York State program, but this is something that I think I really give them credit for doing, for, you know, keeping going. I think it's really important.
And the New York program also gives a doctor room to prescribe cannabis for anything that they feel is necessary. It's no longer categorized into it's got to be this and it's got to be that.
The wording is if it's at the physician's discretion.
Right,
So
physician's discretion.
Ken or I feel that this could help somebody, we can do it, which really opens up the gates.
Right.
Because it used to be autism was not on the list. So you had to have a patient get a note saying they have PTSD from being bullied, or a lot of this population have bowel issues. So you get the note IBS, Crohn's, whatever. So you're sending people who, life is tough as it is, you're sending them on another goose chase.
Right.
So by having it open up like this, if patient, we feel that it will benefit them, why not? And the nice thing about cannabis is you really can't harm anybody, which Ken and I love.
Right, exactly. Side effects include sleeping. Sleeping and eating, yeah, which is, you need to sleep and eat to live, so that's actually a good thing.
Yeah, and you can make it work for you, for the patient as well. So it can be.
And just so to your point before, and that's what the endocannabinoid system is all about, those kind of functions. It really
basics.
controls, yes.
Yeah.
What would you say to doctors who haven't stuck their toe in the cannabis water yet?
You know, again, this is another thing that really aggravates me. 10% of medical schools across the country teach the endocannabinoid system. In fact, I certified a woman 2 weeks ago, brilliant woman who'd worked in hospitals, really lovely, and now at 58 has Alzheimer's, and it's horrible. She has a physician at Mount Sinai, a psychiatrist. I am waiting now 2 weeks because the psychiatrist is not willing to allow the husband to give her cannabis until she has a conversation with me. And I was just, you know, I'm going to have to start hocking him tomorrow. I mean, you know, it's real. It's a common thing. I had something with somebody else, a chronic pain patient who was also getting narcotics, and his doctor said to him, "Oh, I'm not allowed. If you're taking cannabis, you can't use narcotics. That's the law." And I said,
That's not the law.
"That's not the law." I said, "You know, have this person call me." I mean, it aggravates me, you know, the ignorance and lack of understanding of what's going on. I said, "No, that's not true." You know, one of the things at that time, one of the conditions was having a substance abuse issue. And being, you know, and cannabis is really helpful at getting people off of substances. So, you know, at least with that one, that ended very well. Now this patient, for 2 or 3 years, he's not using very many narcotics, and he's using cannabis as well. And his doctor goes, "Oh, okay, that works," you know. But so it's a big problem.
doctors don't really understand the program, how it works. And with recreation, they're telling patients, don't waste your money. Just go to a regular recreational shop. So we're getting undermined at every corner.
No, there really needs to be a lot more medical education. I think the medical schools should be teaching it. You know, to me, I think to maintain your license in New York State, there are certain courses you have to take. And I think this should be
one of them, certainly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they make you spend hours assessing opioids. So spend a half hour on cannabis, which can replace opioids. Or patients on opioids can be using less opioids by subbing in cannabis. Use cannabis when people are on methadone, getting cravings. They smoke a little bit. They're cool.
Right.
So much that can be done, but doctors really, they don't want to know.
And opiates killed a lot of people, and cannabis didn't kill anybody.
Exactly.
The
Besides the
scorecard
side
is
effects.
clear.
Yeah, I mean, opioids, people complain of feeling nausea, nauseous, loopy, and constipated. Hands down, every single person. So if you can get rid of a little bit of any of those, you're ahead of the game.
Sang, I want to go back to you and ask you how you find dealing with older patients, because it seems like a lot of the things that cannabis is really good for really fits into the needs of older patients, but a lot of those older patients still have the preconceived notions about what cannabis is when it comes to medicine.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Bob. I have a lot of patients that come in, and the first thing that they say to me is, I don't want to get high. That's the first thing, because that's what they know, right? So, and there's all this stigma still. But I would have to say, once I have the consultation with those patients, and honestly, the way I speak about it is sort of like very medical, in the sense that I tell them what system it works on, you know, the endocannabinoid system. I say, this is what THC is, and this is what CBD is, and these are the formulations that we have. And then I ask them what medications they're taking. And then I would go through sort of the different effects of the different products. So I have to say, at the end of the day, they're probably my most compliant patients, because they take it exactly the way I told them to take it. So they're my best patients, to be honest. I enjoy actually consulting and speaking with them, because, you know, they actually do get great results because of the fact that they're not stopping once they get one side effect. You know, they'll call me and we talk about sort of what's going on. You know, I tell them it's normal, just pull back the dose a little bit, and then, you know, we'll work it out. You know, I tell everyone that it's trial and error. It's different for everyone. Everyone's tolerances are really different. Everybody's conditions and symptoms are really different. So let's try to figure out what dose works. Let's figure out what dosage form works, and ratios of, you know, cannabinoids. So it's a process, and it can take, you know, 2 to 4 weeks or even longer just to really streamline and figure it out. But once they get to a point where they're really seeing some really good effects, yeah, it's amazing to see that. And you know, they will start to come off some of their medications, or at least reduce the dose of some of these things that are giving some side effects like constipation and things like that. So it's really nice to be able to offer this as a tool that they can put in their tool belt and just kind of use as needed or on a daily basis. So the answer to your question is, my senior patients are like the best because they actually take it and they try to figure it out as they go.
Now, how about you two? Do you have a similar experience with your seniors?
What happens is they walk in the door, they tell me, I'm here because I was told this might help, but I don't want to get high. So I will tell them, according to their symptoms and everything, where I think they will end up, what products will work, but my job is to work them through it. So if we start with their wish and they're not getting where they need be, they're willing to up it, they're willing to add more THC. So by working with people slowly, gently, not saying I told you so, but I'm glad things are better. Let's look at it this way. You can get people to be where they need to be, and they're happy, which is like, how great is that?
And I just would say, it's so, I mean, we all obviously have the same experience, but, and I'm sure for you as well, so many of the patients, especially the elderly who come to me, they have tried everything else, and they've only come to cannabis because nothing else works.
Yeah, last resort.
It's last resort. And it's like, okay, but I don't want to get high.
Well, I'm so glad about the results you guys are having. So I want to thank you, Dr. Ken Weinberg, Dr. Lynn Parodneck, Choi, live from the dispensary at Etain. We appreciate your being here. And this is an ongoing series, so you see them here today. You will see them again because there's so much that is coming out. There's so much that's emerging around cannabis health. I don't even like to say cannabis medicine. I want to say cannabis health because it's a different way of approaching health and approaching healing that seems to just be more integrative and more natural, less aggressive than the pharmaceutical approach with all the side effects. And I think we're just going to gradually see more and more adoption of this, and I think that's going to be for the good. So we appreciate what you're doing for New York medical patients and patients in general. So thank you, Choi. Thank you, Dr. Ken. Thank you, Dr. Lynn. And this has been the empCannabis New York podcast, and we'll be back again next Wednesday. Thanks a lot.
empCannabis New York podcast. Coming to you live every Wednesday. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with someone you know.